Bikini Bottom is gone. And all my streaming videos on demand, I can't demand them anymore.
All right. Well, I am Grant from Screen Rant. How you doing today, Liza?
I'm good. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for joining me. I'm really excited to chat with you about this film. I mean, in case you can't see back there, I'm a fan of the franchise. And so
Awesome.
I think that Saving Bikini Bottom is a great way to expand it. And I particularly love that I read somewhere that you were partly approached because of your work on What We Do in the Shadows season 2 with The Curse. And I'm curious if that ever came up. I believe it was Mark Cesarelli who said that he wanted to approach you because of that. And I'm curious if he ever discussed that with you at all during this process.
I don't think so. I think you're telling me new information, but I find that highly believable. And Mark has been a great colleague and a very warm person. But I'm not sure if I knew that. It's possible also that I didn't remember because, I first read this script during like the height of COVID, and that show was like saving people's lives because there was all these vampires trapped in a house for eternity together. And I think that I did actually really learn a lot from that show that I was able to use here, just because I got to see people who know more about comedy than me benefit from an ensemble that's been together and knows how to respect each other and keep the wildness alive. And I really love the wildness of that show. And I really, in general, love wildness. And so I found it really, I think there's things I learned about wildness that helped me. And I also think that this ensemble is very good at honoring its own wildness. And, when we record the voices, Tom is always there and he's always encouraging everyone to take a shot at something they weren't planning to do. And this script was the funniest script I've read in a long time. It didn't need to be funnier, but I think it's actually wonderful in animation. This was new to me. People are always like, let's plus that. And, in live action, you put it in the can and that's what it is, right? And you can make it better, but like, it is what it is. And in animation, you can always plus it. And I learned a lot about plussing as well.
So one thing I did want to ask you about as well from actually my interview with Carolyn yesterday was she mentioned how you really took the time to storyboard this movie in order to help give her and everybody else a sense of visually what you wanted to do with this project. And so as a filmmaker who comes from the indie genre and who has gone on to What We Do in the Shadows, as well as The Last of Us and now this, I mean, how closely or how in depth do you go with your storyboards? I mean, do you fully draw out every single sequence? Do you find yourself maybe doing loose sketches to help give an idea of what each scene should look like?
We did. I mean, I actually didn't draw a single frame, and I went to art school, but I'm famous for being bad at drawing. But there's a story team that's good at drawing, and they're good at drawing in a certain style. And they know how the characters have been drawn historically. They know what the properties of the characters are, like how far can SpongeBob's arms stretch, or, what is it? This was new, but it's not like they knew from history, but they were able to design what it looks like when Sandy's wings are revealed. And just really know the traditions of the franchise, but also try to take it in a new direction, which I would say was different in the script. I would love to take credit. I mean, I'll take some credit for it, but when I got the script, it was different from the other movies in that usually the characters stay in their world and then there's a big Brechtian interruption where they have to swim on David Hasselhoff's butt or something. And it's a break that's just a different world for a minute. And then you go back to the world you know. This was not written like that. It was written very integrated, like so that actors and landscapes that were real and photographed needed to interact with characters who are animated. And so I tried to learn as much as I could visually about the franchise and then collaborate with the animators, using a kind of lingua franca from the movies to just be like, oh, okay, well, maybe that should be in the middle of the frame, like Kim Novak's bun in Vertigo or something, where the language of the frame is actually known to everyone from movies and animation. It's always going to be a frame, right? And I thought that a good way to navigate the project would be by using some things that I learned from when I worked for Barry Sonnenfeld, actually on a different Netflix show called A Series of Unfortunate Events, where he has this obsession with symmetry. Like, it's just who he is. And I had to learn about it in order to shoot in his style. And I guess maybe more than that, he has an obsession with the idea that the internal timing among voices in the frame is itself funny. Like, it's not all about cross-covered dialogue improvisation. It's like, what would it look like if you were in the theater? And what would it look like if you couldn't edit? And of course, we can edit, and it was very important for us to make it so that we could edit, so it would stay dynamic and fresh and like we are in the present. But it also honors like a whole vaudeville tradition and Buster Keaton and, like, what can you find if you insist on the timing being funny in the wide shot? And then you cut it wherever you want. But like, if you find it in the wide shot, then you know that it's theatrically real and intact. And it is not identical to how this show has been drawn for 23 years, but it's also not the opposite, right? So it was a style where I could take the world that we know and shoot something that looks somewhat like it with a lens. And it doesn't look identical because that's not physics, but it has, I think, it gives an honor to the tradition of how the show has been drawn, even when it's not using a lens, I hope.
I feel like it absolutely does. And that also sort of answered my next question. But I really do love that you found your own way to bring your own vision to it, as well as staying true to what the show has done for so long. And so I would also love to talk about the decision to go 3D animated in comparison to the show's, typical 2D animation. I mean, obviously with Sponge on the Run and with the sequel movie, we saw some of the shift towards that, but where did the idea come from to do this in full 3D CG? Was that the studio already kind of had that in mind? Where was that?
That was in mind when I came to the project. I don't know. I think it was just probably part of the plan and the agreement from the beginning when they agreed to partner with Netflix and what they were going to give them. And I love actually how the animation turned out. And that's a real testament to Piero Peluso. I don't know if you're going to speak with him, but after I was done with everything I have the skills to do, he still had to make everyone three-dimensional and do what I usually do with live action actors, which is to make sure that everything about their physical work is supported and sublime, and he really did that. After it's not that I wasn't on the project, but I wasn't on it every day, and I continued to work in my field, and I would just like talk to the composers on the weekends or whatever and do that which I could do, because I am not actually that useful in directing 3D animation. It turns out I can give notes, I can understand it enough, and I had a lot of guidance in that Mark and Vince and Piero all have a really deep knowledge of what the franchise is, and everyone does. Like, even people that just worked at Nickelodeon for 23 years are like, oh no, he's really porous, and just like everybody knows what's in the archive. And so they were very generous about sharing that with me and making sure that I was in the right universe and that we were putting the right surfaces on all the characters and stuff like that.
Well, I'm glad that it turned out to be such a creatively rewarding experience for you. It sounds like the dream collaboration. Now, one thing I wanted to talk about as well is the casting for this, because obviously we have all the familiar voices returning, but we also have the additions of Craig Robinson, Johnny Knoxville, Wanda Sykes, and I'd like to focus on Craig and Johnny first, because I love that we finally get to see more of Sandy's family and learn more about her backstory. So can you walk me through sort of the casting process for finding who would be the right voices to play Sandy's family?
Sure. I mean, all of the casting was a real collaboration between the network and the what seemed to me to be the creative aspects of the film. So we all just would collaborate on like, oh, could it be this person? Could it be that person? And the network people would help me figure out who actually honors the tradition of this world and this universe, you know? And as soon as I read the script, I was like, well, that's Johnny Knoxville. And I've had the good fortune to work with him before. And I was also pretty sure he would do it because he loves everything that Randy loves. I'm not sure even if the writers might have been thinking of him because he loves a motorcycle. He loves physical comedy. A colleague of mine who by profession is the chief curator of film at the Museum of Modern Art has said repeatedly that he thinks that Johnny and the Jackass guys are the true inheritors of the tradition of physical comedy that is like one of the most important things our country ever did, you know, and maybe they didn't invent it, but like, I'm just going to go with that. I'm just going to lay that down, you know?
Sure.
And I think that I was right. He wanted to do it, which I thought he would. And I thought Craig would be perfect dad because he's literally the person you want to have be your squirrel dad. Like he has a lot of range, but a lot of that range is very warm and like you wish he was your squirrel daddy, you know? And Gray is a person who is a really seasoned voice actor who just works a lot in the field of voice acting. And it turns out she also is from Texas. And so it actually was very confidence building. Like she came in just to do some temp track and we fell in love with it. And we're just like, Gray is going to be Ma Cheeks and about half of the other cheeks, you know? And so that's how we got her family. And I really wanted to get Wanda just because I have never seen her do anything like this. And I really believe in her work. And it's often so grounded, you know, that it's maybe she's not playing herself, but she's playing a really grounded character, not the opposite of herself. And it was a delight for me to see her just go for broke, you know, and we, like every take, we would just try to find the line of like, when does it get to be too much? And over many weeks of shooting, we only found that line like twice. And I just thought like, what kind of courage is that to have someone who's so established and known for a thing who's also willing to go for broke at a different thing. And that was really great for me. And Maddie and Eli are both people that I knew from other shows. And it was a delight for me to get to see them react to each other, you know, because we were mostly in a world where there's not a huge ability to fully react because half the characters are not actually there when you're shooting, you know, and it was really great for me to see them vibing each other, you know, and vibing it too, but they really became a little duo.
They really did. By the end of the movie, I was like, I hope they come back in this franchise at some point. They seem like they would be fun little additional characters to see pop up now and again. And I did actually want to touch on Wanda a little further because the look of Tsunami is such a striking appearance. And I'm curious, again, where was the mind process for that? Was part of that you? Was that costume? Was that already in the script? How did that look for her come about?
I mean, Wanda and I did it together with the costume designer, Dana Pink, who's incredible and who's done quite a lot of, you know, kind of big cartoonish live action Disney. I'm sort of making this up. This might not be a totally accurate biography, but she's made a lot of big costumes. And when we first saw her design, it was very, very fish looking. And we together kind of walked it back into being something that was more like a scientist would wear, you know, a rich heiress scientist who wants to have a mad science lab where you can clone fish and make them breathe air and stuff, but a scientist. And so I think we found this kind of really specific couture looking suit that we built for her. And then we all worked together with this terrific hair and makeup team to make all her other choices seem like what a fish would do or what you would do if you wanted a fish to love you.
it fits the theme so well. So I love all the thought process there. Great. Kudos to you guys on that. I see I'm almost out of time. So before I let you go, I did have one quick question. Aside from the show, I was a huge fan of your episode in The Last of Us. And obviously, I mean, critics loved it, but obviously there's the toxic side of viewers. And I'm curious what your thoughts are, you know, seeing that side of the fan base in comparison to people like myself who really thought that was a beautiful chapter to tell in that story.
Well, someone told me, it was the actress Christine Lottie, actually, if you want to know. She was like, just don't read your reviews, because if you believe the good ones, you have to believe the bad ones or else you're crazy, you know, so just don't read them. And I was like, really? Because like, that's not what Joan Didion says. She says it's like there's a dumpster fire burning out your window, and if you don't know it, it's dangerous. But I took her advice, and I have taken it ever since she told it to me. And what I think is that it's a really beautiful episode. It's also what happens in the game. So it's not like adding new changes to make something different, you know? And also, I couldn't be more delighted with the work of those two young women who were legit, like very young, like at most 20. I think actually they were 18 at the time. I that can be fact checked. I don't remember, but legit very young people who did performance work that was as sophisticated as any that I've ever seen. And I think that, I think people really love that series. And when I went to the hair salon, the guy in the chair next to me was talking about how profound he experienced it philosophically. And I was sitting there texting Craig what he was saying and stuff. And, you know, I think it's a hit. And if there are some people that wish it was a different story, I would encourage them to just like get good enough at the game so that you can get to the place where that chapter is, because that's just what happens, you know?
I couldn't agree more, and I'm very much in the boat of it's a phenomenal episode, and like you said, Storm and Bella do an incredible job with that episode. So,
I just want everyone to love me. That's what I want. But the truth is, it's not bad for the work if it sparks controversy. You know what I mean? Like, it's not what I'm going for, but it's actually not bad for the work.
Puts more eyes on it, as they say. Technically, all press is good press.
Because that had all the eyes on it anyway. Yeah, and I feel
true.
I feel really optimistic too that this show will be seen by a lot of people, and that people will be able to find it. So I'm really excited about that.
I'm really excited for it too. I mean, like I said, I'm a fan of the franchise. I think you did a phenomenal job of expanding it and honoring what came before. So thank you, Liza, so much for taking the time to chat with me. I greatly appreciate it, and hearing all your insight on putting this one together.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Fran.
Wow! Bikini Bottom! I'm so happy!
I'm so horrified!